All right, ladies and gentlemen, the first video here for content based on this. There'll be some other times I'll give you articles and things to read to answer questions on, but this week's just notes, and there'll be some stuff I have you go through as well. So as you're going through these, take these notes. If you want to take pictures of these, if you need to request pages of these, I can get these sent to you as well. Just kind of email me, shoot me an email, and say that you need the notes for this as well. So, but the question to think about today. As we got to American involvement, if you went back and looked at the stuff from the past 2 weeks, or excuse me, from the first week we were off to the second week we were off, there were a whole bunch of stuff I put up there to kind of give you some enrichment stuff to think about World War II, to kind of continue on our path to where we were here. But now we're going to start looking at ending the war in Europe. And this is really about American involvement at D-Day. All right, so question to think about for today, have you ever heard the term D-Day before? And what do you think this term means? I've had a lot of people in the past call it like Destruction Day, Death Day, whatever it might have been. Something like the soldiers might have called it. But D-Day is a military term that is used to really say that this is the day of days. Like the day we are going to run this operation is D-Day. So the D before that really stands for day. So it's day. So that's kind of really where everything kind of comes through here as a really confusing part of this. But whenever soldiers went through a military operation, they always used H hour of D-Day. So like 0400 on June 6th. That could have been when some of these soldiers really started their fighting in mainland Europe, trying to take on Hitler's defenses in the Northern Sea. So you really have this whole idea here behind when the United States gets involved here. And so it's a D-Day, and that is really what stands for the invasion of Normandy, this amphibious invasion where ships, landing craft hit the beaches of Normandy, try to take on the defensive systems, and try to win. All right, so that's really what D-Day stands for. So it's not destruction, not Death Day. It's many other things as well. So let's continue on here to see kind of how this looked out. So if we look at the situation report of Europe, the Russians are pushing back from the east. We went over that a little bit of that war in the last day of our kind of enrichment stuff. So you're going to go back and look at that. You can that aspects. This is the deadliest war here, this Eastern Front war, because the Russians literally sacrificed almost 10 million troops and civilians for the sake of winning, and they didn't care how those people died. If they won, that's all that mattered. So they see this as a really, big victory for them on the Eastern Front to push the Germans back. The Americans and the British took up Northern Africa, are going to Italy, and they're, as you can see, they're coming up the coast of Italy as well, about to take on Rome here. And Great Britain still standing, after the Battle of Britain, which we talked about way before, we did our close read, that they withstood a German invasion, and they remain that launching point to which the Americans and the Allies can launch the invasion. So this is kind of where this all begins, right here in Britain on the southern tier here. All right, as the invasion is planned out, it is supposed to happen on June 5th, 1944, but weather delays it back to June 6th of 1944. The layout, as you can see here in the diagram for Operation Overlord, which is the code name given to this battle, is the five beaches and who were responsible for those beaches, to taking those points to where they can get a stronghold to bring in ships, to bring in supply lines, fuel, whatever was needed here at this point. This was going to be major to take these beaches, because if you can't get a foothold here, you can't bring supplies across this. So your troops have no chance. Troops have no chance to attempt to have a stand a chance against the Germans in mainland Europe. So, but what they tried to do is, before the beach invasions actually began, each of these little boxes here, as you can see throughout, stand for the paratroopers, the airborne divisions, which were dropped in behind Normandy. These are their intended spots. This one right here, the U.S. 101st, this is the Band of Brothers division. If you ever watched or read the book, watch the series or read the book Band of Brothers, if you have time throughout this week or others, not a bad series to watch. in terms of getting a standpoint on what the U.S. Soldier had to go through here at this point. But these are their intended points of when they were supposed to land. Their goal was to drop behind enemy lines as a paratrooper to try to weaken the defenses, maintain bridges, to allow for transportation of tanks and vehicles across from the beaches into mainland Europe, and to hold towns, to set up command posts. And they just set up new command posts further down the line as they continue to go. The problem was the escort planes that were responsible for having these soldiers jump out of. Some of them got lost along their way, and people jumped all over the place. You had some of the 101st landing out here. People were so confused that what they did was they essentially learned everybody else's command. So if you're the 101st and you land at a different spot, you need to know this command, and this command, and what their jobs are, because if you get mixed up, you need to know what they're doing. So, imagine studying for a test, but not just studying for one test, but studying for everybody else's. So, like Mr. McCormick, Mr. Shear, Mr. Walborn, all the other U.S. history teachers, and maybe Mr. Hawkins and AP. You need to know all their tests and all their materials as well before we go into this battle. So this is a big, huge study for the soldiers here at this point, to study their plans and go into this battle as a way of fighting. So, but the paratroopers landed, even though it was a mass amount of confusion. It not only was it confusing for the U.S., but because the Germans had no clue who was attacking from where, they were also confused. So it actually worked for the benefit of the U.S. That's kind of where this comes in, and that any airborne soldier landing behind enemy lines before the attack on the beaches, they will tell you that this is a huge screw up by the airborne, by the planes and the pilots that were supposed to drop them off at a certain time. But then you have Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. You can see which countries are responsible for those there. The most famous, which is made in the movie Saving Private Ryan, is Omaha Beach here. Again, that scene is one of the best scenes ever done, I think, in my opinion, in military movie history. Now, from World War II especially, you can take a look at that scene if you want to for Saving Private Ryan. I'm sure YouTube has it for the invasion, and see what that might have been like, how difficult it was for soldiers to land there. But there are a whole bunch of other points as well. There's one up here too called Point to Hawk, I believe it was called, to where the Americans were supposed to take as well. It was a gun post here, like a huge artillery cannon that was set up here that was going to be a possible target that could take out American ships crossing the channel. So Americans were to take that out as well. So you had a whole bunch of these targets, and you can see the plan as it goes out. Now, to show you kind of how this played out and how important Normandy was, I have the video that we've been watching. I'll post a link to that video in the Times up on my Canvas page as well for that particular section, because this video goes over this material way better than I ever could. All right, so if while you're watching this video, I'll also kind of put some questions up there for you, something you can take note on as to what you need to look out for. What was the most important thing that could have happened to make D-Day successful? Find that one thing. Watch the entire video. It's only 12 minutes, a little under 12 minutes actually, and you can see and find what they're referring to as to why this invasion was extremely successful. What was done? How was it successful? Why was it something that pretty much was the beginning of the end of the war? All right. So once this invasion begins, it's pretty much the beginning of the end for the Germans. In a matter of, say, June 1944, less than a year later, 11 months later, the Americans have taken Berlin. That's when Hitler surrenders. So actually, Hitler commits suicide and Germany surrenders. But along the way, as Americans are going throughout the rest of Europe to take these places, they notice events that they would have never thought would have happened when it comes down to genocide. Most of you last year, when you did your discussion at 8th grade English class, and many of you that kind of went through this district that are not in 9th grade this year, but you remember the Holocaust as an event that you talked heavily about in English class in 8th grade. This is something that American soldiers were not briefed on. They were never instructed about what to expect. They came across these camps as they went to individual towns. So they went from one town to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. They would find camps in some. They would not find camps in others. But as it became more clear that Americans were going to take on Germans and take different places, the SS troops that were meant to guard these places would kill as many of these soldiers as these prisoners as they could have before they left. All right. So when you see the American soldiers standing here at the pretty much on top of or near these carcasses, they're pretty much showing the entire town of this concentration camp. My guess is Dachau or Buchenwald. As this camp was liberated, the dead, which were strewn throughout the entire camp, they were just left there, no burial, nothing like that, no mass grave that the Germans were pretty famous for early on in their killing of Jewish people throughout Europe. But here's an American soldier having a interpreter tell these people what they're going to do. And many times the American troops enforced martial law on these places and told the villagers that they had to come in and clean up this mess, because American soldiers believed that these people knew exactly what was going on in those camps. None of the German citizens knew. They were told it was a POW camp, not a death camp, where people were killed and murdered and then eventually burned. So Americans believed that these villagers knew. They had no clue whatsoever. So that's really where we see the main aspect of this, confusion begin. All right, but this is one of many genocides here. You look at the deliberate killings of peoples. You look at other genocides that are there. China, Tibet, Mao Zedong, and after World War II is over, China gets its independence back. Mao Zedong kills 76 million people. Leopold of Belgium kills 8 million people in the Congo between over 20 years, 22 years. Joseph Stalin in the Russian gulags, we talked about his ruthlessness right at the very beginning of this unit. 7 million people. Hideki Tojo in Japan, 5 million people. People that all were individuals that were seen as threats to political threats. Then you have Bashar al-Assad of Syria. This is where most of the ISIS stuff begins, where Assad tries to kill individuals in Syria that he thinks are unwanted, mostly the Kurds. 50,000 people are killed in chemical attacks. I put this up here because it's the most recent, not the most amount. But if you look at a map here, you can see where most of the areas belong. Now, some of my numbers on my previous page kind of contradict here, but you can see the sizes and where this fits. Obviously, you have Germany here. You can see this, one of the larger circles here, but not the biggest. China and the Soviet Union were definitely by far the largest in terms of the estimated genocide by which they committed. All right. So what I want to do here is I want to go over some information for you, so you can take notes on. If you want to write this question down, you can, and then write some of these answers down. But normally this would be book work that I would have you answer questions to, but I'm not going to do that to you here this first week out. I just want you to look through this, and I want you to be able to see this and take notes on it and kind of get this main point here, because we're not going to go over like the Diary of Anne Frank. We're not going to go through a lot of those survivor stories of the Holocaust. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to give you as much as I can to give you a liberation perspective, because American troops that liberated these camps sent their stories, what they saw, back home with them, and that's what makes up the American memory of this Holocaust. All right. So, prior to World War II, beginning of World War II, what was the official policy of Nazi Germany in the 1930s? All right. This policy was anti-Semitism. All right. The main goal of this purpose was essentially to get rid of the Jews. All right. And this included discrimination at all levels of society, businesses, homes. They would discriminate people from buying houses. All this stuff was what they could really do. All right. So I'm going to end this video here because I think my time limit is up for this. But I'm going to start a new one, and I'll post this up here right next to it so you can see this as part 1, part 2. All right. So I'm going to get to the next question here. I might start, this one here. The last page is to kind of make sure we hit this topic, but I want to make sure we get this, and I don't want to run out of time here and kind of have the video end abruptly. All right, so let me stop the video and go to right to part 2.